Hello, my gamers. This is a little brief video that I am recording while I am procrastinating a bit to get something done today. There are some interesting fan discussions about the philosophy and world of Star Wars that I thought were interesting, and one of them is the question of what would happen to the Star Wars continuity if Anakin Skywalker never falls to the dark side. Because that is like the central pillar of these 9 movies and most of the television series, is that you have this one guy that falls into darkness, and because he falls into darkness, the whole cosmology is wrecked. Well, balderdash. I think the question of if Anakin doesn't fall into the dark side, what does Star Wars look like, is interesting, but I don't think it's actually end up being that different. Now, fans range all over the place about what happens if you change Anakin's fall. Some people postulate he and Padme go off and live happily ever after as he leaves the Jedi Order, and he's content to brood a bunch of kids. Others have him become the new Grand Master of the Order after Yoda. Others even have him supplant the Emperor and rule the galaxy in peace and harmony. Well, I don't think any of that's going to happen. After some careful thinking about the concept, here's my suggestion of what would most likely happen if Anakin never fell to the dark side. Anakin's fall into darkness is largely believed to come from the impact of the death of his mother and his failure to return and free her. But I believe it's actually far more deeper than that. Anakin's fall into darkness is a tale about children being forced to grow up too fast in a traumatic environment and without a functional family. The trauma the child suffers from these 3 factors leaves them with severe character faults that have led to Anakin's fall. We can see this theory confirmed by the episode of the Clone Wars where Ahsoka notices the rage that Anakin has for any slaver, almost force-choking the man to death in front of everyone. We see it again in Attack of the Clones when Anakin slaughters the children of the Sand People who stole his mother. These children had no part in the death of Shmi, but Anakin still slaughters them. And finally, we see it in the haughtiness that Anakin expresses throughout the entire series about the Jedi not allowing him to prove himself. Most notably in Revenge of the Sith, when this becomes a major issue with Anakin sitting upon the council. Thus, in any timeline in which Anakin does not fall into darkness, these 3 issues have to be resolved. Not to mention the illicit love affair with Padme. Our alternate timeline begins shortly after the events of Episode 1. That is The Phantom Menace. Anakin proves to be a very quick learner, full of raw power. Obi-Wan, in this timeline, receives something that he does not receive, likely, in the original timeline. That is, he receives aid in tutoring the young Skywalker. I find it extremely difficult to believe that in an order full of thousands of Jedi, there isn't at least one other person who has some mercy on this kid. That's highly unrealistic. The sagacious and patient Jedi Master smacks Obi-Wan upside his skull, metaphorically speaking, when he learns about Obi-Wan's teaching methods. Obi-Wan constantly would be complaining and whining about his apprentice being stubborn, willful, and an impatient know-it-all. The sagacious Jedi helping him would point out that sometimes people cannot be told a lesson or trained to it. They must organically go through it of their own, and this may involve a bit of benign deception. You've often heard the phrase, sometimes to teach that person that lesson, I had to trick them into it. Well, this singular change in Anakin's training, I feel, would alter Anakin's perception of training, which is one of the key issues in the early parts of the Clone Wars movie and in the Clone Wars TV series. How Anakin feels about training, and that in turn reflects how he feels about the Jedi and the Order. Rather than feel as if Anakin is being constrained, he would feel that with each puzzle he solves, he has accomplished something and proven himself to the Jedi, and he would then feel that he had earned that respect he so desperately desires from his master and the other Jedi of the Order. With time, the lessons would get more subtle, forcing him to become more introspective and open up about what he is experiencing. This would prevent Anakin's trait of feeling isolated and trying to solve all of his problems on his own, a problem constantly commented on during the Clone Wars series and that we see again in the prequel movies. With more openness on Anakin's part about his feelings for Padme and hers for him, it doesn't become something to hide. Rather, the relationship and the feelings thereof become just simply another emotional puzzle for him to sort through and work through, one in which he doesn't have to fear guilt and shame. Even if Anakin does not reveal the affair to his master, the emotional impact of the affair now upon both Padme and Anakin is far different. Let's say Anakin doesn't reveal his relationship to his master, because really, since it is against the Jedi rules, he would be disinclined to do so. And the relationship with Padme continues, as it does during the regular canonical episodes of the timeline, but now with an emotional change. Rather than fearing discovery, Anakin is simply concerned about being discovered. He knows that if the affair is found out, he'll be disciplined, but because he's handling it in a much more mature manner, he may not be expulsed. And if he is expulsed, he'll still have Padme. With more introspection, the guilt may not metastasize into a cancer of fear. That is, fear about what the other Jedi would think about it. The Clone War progresses as we see it in the series, with Anakin's brashness and impetuousness being unchanged. To curtail this impulsiveness and speed his maturity, Yoda assigns Ahsoka Tano to Anakin to be a Padawan, just as in the canonical series. The pairing proves to be highly effective not only for the war, but for Anakin and Ahsoka's growth. The Clone Wars stories progress as canon with one minor change. When the Mortis story takes place in the series, Anakin succeeds in mastering the son and daughter, just as he does in the canonical episode, but is still reluctant to accept the position, just as he is in the canonical episode, because of his love for Padme. Anakin asks the father for one day to consider all the ramifications of this decision, and the father grants this, sensing that the Jedi will eventually say yes to remaining on Mortis and becoming the new father to maintain the balance between the son and the daughter. Anakin spends the day speaking with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan and explains what he knows the proper thing to do would be, which would be to remain, but that he has issues. And I picture the conversation going something like this. Anakin, Master, I know what I must do, but I do not know if I have the strength to do it. Every day, for an eternity. I am afraid, not of the task or myself, but that I would leave behind a concern that would cause me to regret and possibly neglect my duty. Obi-Wan, I see. You're speaking of your friendship with Padme Amidala. Anakin, yes, Master. She is my best friend. Well, at least my best friend who's not a Jedi. I will admit that I am attached to her. I haven't allowed an emotional attachment to form with her. I don't think I can do this if I couldn't talk with her again. Snips. Master Skywalker, I realize I am young, but I'm not that young. And I am fully aware of your friendship with Padme. Neither one of you is as subtle as you think, and Rex doesn't lie well at all. I don't know what Padme would say if she were here, but I think she would ask you to think of something larger than yourself and her friendship. She has lived her life in the service of others. She would expect you to do the same. Obi-Wan. Anakin, do you remember when Padme fell off the gunship when we were chasing Dooku? Anakin, I do. I was very concerned for her. Obi-Wan. What did I ask you about what Padme would do? Anakin. That she would do her duty, as did we. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Snips. I have a lot to consider now. Not about what I will do, but how I will go about doing it. The Jedi part, and Anakin spends some hours figuring out what to record as a final message to Padme. Finally, he records a message that sounds something like this. Anakin. Hi, Padme. I have some good news. I'm I'm going to finally fulfill the prophecy of the Chosen One by bringing about balance to the Force. Yay! Unfortunately, I also have some bad news. To do it, I can't come home. In many ways, this is worse than if I had died. Every day I will know that I could come home to you and that I chose not to. I'm afraid that you will hate me for that. I know you will never admit that out loud, but I also know you will find moments when you are briefly lonely or despondent. In those moments you will hate me. Obi-Wan and Snips will explain why I had to remain, but I wanted you to know that if there was any other way I would have found it. But the cost of my not remaining is too high. You would not respect me if I didn't pay it. So I must remain. I love you, Padme, and I hope in time you will forgive me. Anakin returns to the ship to give the recording to Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, only to find them missing. A message from the sun is scrawled on a wall of the ship, and tells Anakin that if he wishes for his friends to live, he must come collect them from the sun near a place on Mortis where the dark side is very, very strong. Here a great battle between Anakin and the sun, during which they verbally as well as physically combat one another, will take place. The battle is close to its ending with Anakin in the superior position, when the sun conjures up the vision of darkness that we see in the canonical episode. Anakin suffers seeing a future in which he becomes Darth Vader and all the evils he will do as Vader. And, for fear of what he will do, and convinced that the sun is correct in the sun's argument that only the sun's guidance can prevent this, that these things are fated to happen unless the sun guides Anakin. Anakin succumbs to the darkness of the sun and falls. But since Ahsoka and Obi-Wan have not fallen, because in the original canonical episode, Ahsoka had fallen, they mount a defense before the ship, with Obi-Wan and Ahsoka dueling Anakin while the daughter duels the sun. Their plan is not only to try to persuade Anakin to come back to the light, but if all else fails, with their lightsabers, to destroy the ship. The son manages to wound the daughter, defeating her. And as he's about to board the ship, the father attempts to stop him with the dagger of Mortis. The father misses his strike, however, and accidentally stabs himself. The son, horrified by this loss he has inadvertently caused, loses his control on Anakin, and fails to notice the daughter pick up the blade. And in her own rage, she stabs the son. Her own wounds are very severe, and she too is in danger of expiring because of her fate being linked to that of the son. During the battle with Anakin, Ahsoka was also wounded, just as she is in the canonical episode, and using the last of her power in gratitude for Ahsoka's sacrifice, the daughter gives Ahsoka that portion of her power that we see in the stories of Rebels, with Ahsoka possessing the daughter's spirit in the form of a small avatar. This way, those stories can still happen in the future. The Jedi board their shuttle and leave Mortis. Anakin does not speak to anyone about his failure for many weeks, sinking into a deep depression and feeling worthless. The canonical stories proceed, now as we normally see them, until we come to the movie The Revenge of the Sith. Here, when Mace Windu and Anakin confirm that Palpatine is the Sith, and confront him, we have a different outcome. When Sheev Palpatine begs Anakin to spare his life from Mace, rather than attack Mace, Anakin instead places himself between Windu and the Sith. He absorbs the Force lightning from the Emperor with his lightsaber, and with the Force holds Mace's weapon arms from striking. When the canonical line, "I need him," is usually spoken by Anakin, instead Anakin says, "Master Windu, remember your oath as a Jedi. I know what it's like to feel such anger at being betrayed, at having to suffer such loss, at having to wonder if enduring all the sacrifices is really worth it. And I know how tempting it is to take the easy way out of a horror. I have been blinded by that hate and that fear, but no more. I failed when I was tempted once and committed a great evil. I will not commit nor stand by and let one happen again." Mace regains his composure and is shocked when Anakin then turns to the Emperor and says, "Isn't it strange how Master Windu sounded exactly like you did when Dooku was at my mercy?" The Emperor has time to utter, "Anakin, don't," before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stabs him with the saber through the heart. Anakin, don't, before Anakin stab because Mace's argument is the correct one. The Emperor does really control the Senate. The Emperor does really control the courts. Trying to get him a conviction with him alive would be impossible. But when Annikin kills the Emperor, rather than the normal, hate-filled face we see at, say, the killing of the younglings, instead we see nothing. Annikin is completely serene, for he has finally learned, at great personal cost, the final lesson of a warrior in the Star Wars universe. That is, how to kill without hatred. Windu and Annikin present all the evidence to the Senate of Palpatine's involvement in the plots to destroy the Republic, and with him no longer being able to bribe them, all the people he had bribed or had blackmail over are more than willing to vote the proper way for the Republic's health. Thinking that will finally bring about peace with the Separatists, Windu and Annikin leave the peace negotiations to the Republic. But this does not go well. Instead of unity, the Senate falls into a malaise of minor parties constantly attacking and undercutting one another, and a constant succession of emergency chancellors, each one more incompetent than the last. The military, tired of losing battles because of Senate interference, not being funded correctly, and of faulty peace treaties, stages a coup and ostracizes all the Jedi from the Republic's space as they blame the Jedi for the Senate's failure. Unless you think that's a stretch, consider the Clone Wars episode where Moff Tarkin, at the time a captain when Anakin meets him, expresses how many people in the military think the Jedi should not be involved in the government or the military. This coup, led by various Moffs, establishes an interplanetary empire and begins making marked progress in the wars with the Separatists, which in turn gives it much popularity with the common people. As the Jedi are still considered a threat to this empire by the military, with all the clones still at their disposal, initiates Order 66. Part of this is a suspicion of the Jedi trying to take over the Republic. Part of it is the natural dark side tendencies that we've seen in some of the Moffs. The clones loyal to the Jedi attack them because of their BioWare, leading to the same result much as before. Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and the others flee into exile and separate the remaining Jedi so that they will not all fall victim to the Empire. But Anakin cannot just remain hidden. Giving his children to Obi-Wan to hide, Anakin gathers what clones remain loyal in a last-ditch effort to break the emerging Empire's hold on the core worlds. This attack will fail disastrously, with Anakin not perishing in a firefight or a saber duel, but being swarmed by enemy fighter planes in a dogfight. He dies nearly instantly while personally leading perhaps a bombing run on a capital ship, baited by the Moffs who know he would not be able to resist it. When Obi-Wan and Yoda feel him perish, and when he dies, his last words are, "Padme, I'm sorry." Feeling him perish, Padme dies shortly thereafter due to depression, and the midi-chlorian poisoning that Lucas has recently revealed in an interview was the actual cause of her death. If you're not familiar with that, there was supposed to be a scene in the last prequel movie where Padme goes to Yoda because she's experiencing great pain in her pregnancies, which is how Yoda will discover the children. The theory was that a non-Force user with too many midi-chlorians in their blood, such as from a pregnancy of twins, would be sort of poisoned by the effect, and so much life energy be going into the pregnancy that would rob the mother of all the power to live. Knowing that the new Empire will seek to make examples of the Jedi and any of their relatives, Yoda and Ben hide Luke and Leia in the same manner as they do in the core canonical episodes, sensing that this new Empire without Jedi will have more dark side corruption than before. And I realize it's tempting not to think that way since there's no Emperor, but keep in mind, without a singular Sith Lord controlling the dark side will kind of tempt everyone all at once. And with nothing to fear, they will simply express that power however they wish. It would be like giving a city full of teenagers the keys to the cars and the stores. Rather than one or two or a few Sith, you will have literally hundreds of dark side corrupted Force users inflicting more overt suffering and more raw displays of power. And something like the witch trials would come back up, as people and the military would be justly afraid of anyone able to use the Force. Falling into darkness would be almost a guarantee for all the Force users that are still being born, as there's no longer a Jedi Order to be a guiding light to guide them. So there you have it. There you have what I think realistically would happen if Anakin Skywalker never officially fell to the dark side. And yes, it's a grim vision. In some ways, it could be argued, despite all the death, at least if Anakin falls to the dark side, the evil is concentrated and you have something to fight. In this outline I just presented to you, there would be nothing to fight. And as a result, it really wouldn't be Star Wars.